Hello! Oh man, I wonder if everybody heard that little jingle that my laptop just made, reminding me that I need to water the plants, which I've already done today. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's another edition of How to Start Stargazing, where I start by talking and realizing I have not cleared my throat very well, which I should have done while I was waiting. How's everybody doing? How you doing? Watching whenever you are. I want to say I appreciate you for tuning in, especially for tuning in right at the start. I appreciate you if you're watching this on YouTube later. I appreciate it if you're one of the people who just mostly watches this to comment a line from Super Mario Frustration. That's very nice of you also. I thought today we would do a little change of scenery here. So I downloaded a new scenery pack, which is pretty nice. And it's fun. It's this little site here. I think that, you know, they've got this big flat area here, and then the night sky or the day sky, a little telescope and stuff, which is very nice. But I thought I'd download someplace new for us to look at. But today, my goal is I want to talk about what we can see in the night sky tonight here from the Northern Hemisphere, where I live. But also, I get people asking all the time, hey, what are you going to do with the Southern Hemisphere? And so I thought we'd explore a little bit of the Southern Hemisphere stars as well. Does that sound okay? And if you've never thought about the Southern Hemisphere stars, this will be exciting for you, especially if you're maybe planning on getting going down there at some point in your life, because there are totally different stars, and we'll show off why that's the case as well. But let's start the way we always do, by letting it go tonight. So we'll say goodbye to our beautiful afternoon here. And by the way, the weather where I'm living right now is just as pretty as this. When I watered the plants this morning, my wife and I sat outside and had breakfast, and it was just lovely. It's one of my favorite times of year living in the desert, because it's not hot yet, it's not cold. You get these just beautiful, beautiful days. Great for sitting outside, great for gardening, all that sort of stuff. But this is the thing about the night sky, not the day sky, so let's let the sun go. So the sun is going to be setting in the west. You can see the time, remember, down here, it's 3, 4, 5. And the sun has set, and I will stop. You can see everything getting darker in this little simulation, which is kind of charming. And there we go. Boom. So here we are at about 8. Let's go to 8 p.m. Here's 8 p.m. And we can see the beautiful night sky. Right now, I'm actually going to turn off some of this stuff. I should always make sure to turn off before. I should also, let's make sure that I've turned off my solar system objects as well. Boom. Here's what the night sky would look like from a pretty dark spot. And if, again, I really hope someone watching this has tried to make a trek in the months that I've been doing this. This is my 9th entry in this series, so we're almost a full year, and then I'll be done with this series because I just wanted to do one a month. But like, I hope that you've gone someplace where it's dark and seen the stars like this, because really, it's something spectacular. And it doesn't take that much driving, and right now, as we're finishing the pandemic, it's a really good thing to do to just get out of the city where you live in and go out someplace where you can see the stars and really use some of the knowledge you've learned. But remember, we always start by figuring which way north is. So if we were just looking where the sun is set, we're going to turn 90 degrees to the right, and here's north. And so we can already start to see the classic things. And this is why I just continually bring this up at the beginning of these videos, because I want to really drive home this idea that you can just follow along with my brain process, make it your brain process for how you figure out when night sky you are. So once you're looking north, you've seen where the sun is just set. You turn 90 degrees to the right, you're looking north. You won't have these little markers here, but you can also use the compass on your phone. Like, I can just tell my phone, like, hey Siri, open the compass. I'm like, boom, there's a compass app. So I know that way's north. So boom, you can even use your compass app on your phone, you know. But once you know which way's north, at this time of year, right after sunset, the Big Dipper is visible. Sometimes it's not. We talked about that a number of months ago when it was down lower the horizon. But now, in the evening, in the spring, and in the summer, it's pretty easily visible because it's, you know, after sunset, because it's up here. A little bit later, it'll be farther over along here. But for right now, pretty straightforward. And we can use that to find which way is exactly north, because remember, these two stars here are Doobie and Merak, and they point to, see right here, this is Doobie, this is Merak, and they point towards the North Star right there. So there's the North Star, just these two stars pointing the North Star, and boom. And you're saying, well, maybe I can't see that. Maybe there's a building or something in the way. Well, this is why you want to have a large site where there's not, you know, a lot of trees and stuff. Even in this site here, where there are some trees on the horizon, the person who's taken this shot has like tried to get away from those trees. But you can see the Big Dipper right here, pretty bright, pretty obvious. Remember, it's also the Great Bear constellation. There's a bunch of ways of representing the bear. If you put the art on here, you can see that this is a bear with a crazy tail that bears don't normally have. I don't like that very much. I like thinking about it as in this is the nose, there's the eye, the back comes around this way, the paws. It's wearing like a little saddle, I guess, right? And these two stars, Dubhe and Merak, point to this, which is part of the Little Dipper, a little tiny bear with a little tiny tail if you want to use that as well. So you probably saw the little bear here. Little bear, big bear. Pretty cool. And so these are things that I always bring up because if you live in the Northern Hemisphere, they are pretty omnipresent. We'll talk about the Southern Hemisphere a little bit later, but for right now, they're just a really good way of starting. And last month, we also talked about the fact that if you go the other direction from the North Star using Dubhe and Merak, you kind of point your way, you get over to this right here, which is a great springtime constellation of Leo the Lion. So remember, we found the Big Dipper. We've kind of used these two stars, which if you point one way, points to the North Star, but if you use the other way, points right to the body of Leo the Lion. So Leo's right here. I'm going to zoom in on Leo for you. Leo's got a tail, back legs, front legs. This is the body, the mane of Leo, and then the head comes up here, right? So if we put on the lines like this, it looks like a little dustbuster. Let's change the lines. Let's change my sky and viewing option to be HA ray. There we go. So now if I do this, you can see it looks more like a lion, huh? Pretty cool lion. Front legs, back legs, tail, mane, head, right? And so if I go back over to the Big Dipper, you can see that it looks a lot more like a bear sitting down, right? It's a little hard to see, but if I kind of rotate it a little bit there's the head, the little back, the back legs, right? Remember, I'll say it once, I'll say it 1,000 times on this video channel. The constellations are just an area of the sky. They're not the way of connecting the dots. You can connect the dots any way you want. You can connect the dots even outside of the lines too, because, you know, the stars are yours to do what you want with them. But for right now, this is a kind of classic Western constellation of Leo. And the way we found it, we figured out which way north was. We found the Big Dipper over towards the north because it'll be someplace over in this arc here. Because remember, that star will always be right where it is because the north pole of the Earth points towards it. The rest of the stars will orbit around, will rotate around it as the Earth turns on its axis. But so either this is below the horizon, and this is especially true if you're pretty far towards the equator. But if you're far enough north, if you live in Canada or something like this, this should be a lot easier to see. But finding this, one way points towards the North Star, and the other way points towards Leo the Lion. And the other way we can find Leo right now is that at this time of the month, late March, early April, the moon is here. And so if you go out tonight, you can find the moon and just go say, hey, the moon's rising right above the horizon, and we can zoom in on the moon here, and you can see that the moon is pretty much full right now. It's actually full? What is it? How close is it to being full? It's illuminated. Yeah, well, this is a full moon. Great. Hey, full moon night. Nice for us. And so if you look just above the full moon, right after the sun has set and the moon has risen, because that's how it works in terms of the sun setting. If you have a full moon, the moon must be in a specific spot where it's fully lit up. So as the sun sets, the moon rises. And if you look just above that, you'll find Leo the Lion here. Pretty cool. We could also trace this down. You can use this curve right here, the arc of the handle of the Big Dipper, to point here to Arcturus, this star Arcturus here, which is a star that means bear watcher. And I think we talked about this like in the first couple months of me doing this, which if I go back, I have a big beard, and I'm glad that I shaved that. But I'll show you that a little bit more as we let time go on. But this is just right now, 8:11 p.m., just so not getting out too late, okay? And so those are kind of some of the pretty quick, obvious things. If we look over here towards where the sun is just set, you get some of the great constellations we've been talking about all winter. The winter constellations, Orion, you got Taurus the bull, which now, like, Taurus is like pretty straight on. This V right here is pretty straight on. If I put the lines on, you can see that HA Ray makes Taurus look crazy with this giant head. I prefer to think of Taurus as a head here and then horns that come up this way. This thing right here, though, is a little interesting. It's not actually supposed to be there. It's not a star. This is Mars. And Mars is as easy to ever see it. Right now, there's a lot of ways to see it. Look towards where the sun has set. Look towards where Orion is. Pretty classic, obvious. And just follow, one of the diagonals to see it. Really red. It won't twinkle. It's right above the V of Taurus. This star is called Aldebaran. You got Taurus's, right above Taurus's head. And inside of the horns of Taurus is Mars, which is pretty cool. You can see here in this art here. Oops, I guess I don't have art for HA Ray stuff, but that's fine. And then down here you have Sirius, the brightest star in the sky, part of the constellation of the dog. If I put the lines on here, you can see it's the dog kind of trotting along. Pretty cool. And I'm showing this here because I want you to look at this Orion right now. Head, you've got broad shoulders, belt, legs. This is on the right side is where the shield is, and then the club is hanging above the head. All right, so think about how she's standing there and how like that, like the head is above the legs. You know, for a Western perspective, from the Northern Hemisphere perspective, that's how it looks. And I want you to think about that and remember that when we look at the Southern Hemisphere, because it'll be different. Okay, so this is why I'm setting this up right now as a thing to remember. Above, we can see Castor and Pollux, right? The Gemini stars. And if I zoom out a little bit, you can see essentially most of the winter triangle, or the winter hexagon, which is here, 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 right? So Sirius to Rigel in Orion, right? So if I turn the lines on here for Orion, you can see Orion's leg. Up to Aldebaran in Taurus, all the way up here to Capella in the Charioteer or Auriga, which is the name of the constellation, Auriga, down to Castor and Pollux kind of together as one area, one point on this, but I guess you could say Pollux, the brighter of the two. Down here to Procyon, which means before the dog. And I learned just a couple weeks ago that there's a Disney movie called Treasure Planet, and they made a video game called Battle for Procyon. And someone on a podcast I was listening to called it Procyon, but it is, in fact, Procyon. And then down here, back to Sirius. The winter hexagon, whereas I joke about each time, it looks like a rupee from The Legend of Zelda. And in the middle is Betelgeuse, the shoulder of Orion here. Pretty cool. And look at this. Hey, we got a satellite. Wonder what it is. It's Starlink 1313, a Starlink artificial satellite. You know, you could imagine if you were taking images of the space, you'd get this big white line across your image if you were taking an image here, because it would just like slowly drag its light across. It's no good. Not a big fan of the satellites, artificial satellites. I also should say, if you're watching, KJ, happy birthday. So let's keep looking towards the south, though, and see what can we see. What's over in this area? What's in this part of the sky? Because we've seen Leo, but what else can we see? And we can advance time a little bit. Let's go to 9 p.m. to see some new stuff. 9 is 10 p.m. Why not? The moon has gone up here. We see this star right here, which we know we've arced to Arcturus here. It's part of the constellation of Bootes, the herdsman, the shepherd, which looks kind of like an ice cream cone. This is the cone, and then the ice cream is up here. But if you look at H.A. Ray's drawing, it's like a little man sitting with a big pipe, a little hat up here. But this is Arcturus. Arcturus means bear watcher because, as I said, it's watching the bear constellation. But it's pretty easy. And if you keep going here, you can see this star here is called Spica. And you can arc to Arcturus and speed on to Spica. And look, it just makes this big long curve here, which is really easy to help find, right? You find the Big Dipper, just go. And the moon also helps. But Spica is in the constellation of Virgo, the Virgin. And Virgo is a very funny looking constellation here. It's not a lot of very bright stars, a lot of really faint, not super easy to see stars. When I do this show for children's groups like at Planetaria and stuff, I always say Virgo is the lady lying down, because that's what she is. Spica here is a name that means ear of wheat. It's Alpha Virginis. I should not say that. Spica means ear of wheat because the lady is holding on to an ear of wheat in her hand historically. Like if I go back and I change the viewing options to Western, takes a second, and you can see she's holding wheat here. Look at her. I guess she's not even lying down there. She's just got more wheat over here. She's a real big fan of wheat. Real wheat fan. And the moon's in there. The moon is currently in Virgo. But now I want to show off some other ones. I have to say, the spring sky doesn't have my favorite constellations. There's some good ones, but it's mostly a lot of faint things. If you look here, there's not a lot of really bright objects. There's the moon over here. We can see Sirius right here and Procyon. But like in this giant chunk of the sky, there's not much. So let's turn to the sky map. As we do, turn on our sky map. Oh, I had the Southern Hemisphere. Let's turn on the Northern Hemisphere sky map. Because we'll get there in a second. Here's our sky map. And so I'll drag myself over here. Oh, whoops, wrong thing to drag. There we go. Dink. We use the Kevin Hainline hand pointer. We've already looked at the Big Dipper here pointing towards the North Star. We looked at pointing towards Arcturus. We have Virgo rising over here. But there's like this big chunk of sky in the south and southeast. There's not much. Okay, and so let's see what we can see. All right, so we've seen Sirius, but what's between it? Well, first off, there's not a lot, right? There's some faint constellations here, but they're not generally used. There's this here, which is Hydra, and then there's Crater, which is the cup, and then Corvus, which is one of my favorite little spring constellations, which is the crow. So let's see if we can see those, okay? And to see them right now, this says that it's late March, it's 8 p.m. We're at 10, so notice these things are going to be shifted up a little bit. They should be moved up. So we'll look towards the southeast and see if we can find them a little bit north of southeast, right? So we're looking southeast. The way we figured out where southeast was that we said, all right, well, I know which way north is because I'm looking back for the Big Dipper. It's pointing down here. This is north, so I just turn 180 degrees around and here. And then if I look a little bit to the right, look, 90 degrees would be south, or would be east, but southeast, or southwest is, or sorry, southeast is 90 degrees to the left would be east, and just 45 degrees would be southeast. So this is where we're looking now. The moon is in this part of the sky. But we're looking for, let's start with Corvus, because I like Corvus a lot and it's pretty obvious, especially because the moon's here. If you can find Spica by arc to Arcturus, speeding on to Spica. Let's turn off the sky map. I always forget to do that. Boop. Speeding on to Spica here. Then if you keep going a little bit, you'll see Corvus. So Corvus is right here. Corvus is a little constellation that kind of, you have to have a pretty good imagination to see kind of like a fat little crow or raven here. But Corvus has a tail that comes down here and the body's here and the little beak's up here. So if I put on the art, you can see that they've drawn it in a different way with this beak and everything up here. But if I put the lines on, this is how it's generally drawn. And I just imagine it as kind of a fat bird just sitting here with a little tiny beak up here, right? This is a fine version of it if you want to draw this, you know, like if you're pretty, but like what's amazing about Corvus is that Corvus is sitting on the snake. And the snake constellation, if I draw the lines here, you can see the constellation lines coming up here. And so Corvus is just like a bird sitting on a snake. Pretty cool. And next to it, and it's a little hard to see also, is the cup. And so if I put this on, you can see that the cup has, you know, it's a faint constellation, but if I turn it off, you can see kind of there's the cup and then the body, right? It's the cup of a carpenter. It's not easy to see. I have to say, the constellations here, especially when the moon's here, you can see that it's even harder to see. If I move the moon out, you can see it, but I guarantee you can see this even from a fairly bright site. I was able to see this when I lived in Los Angeles fairly easily. The snake is a lot harder to see because it's not a lot of very bright objects. But for right now, you could just imagine that the bird and Spica are hanging out right near the moon. The moon, though, will move. So tomorrow, if I change the date, I go 329, same time of night. Look where the moon's gone. Look where the moon's gone. So you can come out in just a couple days on the 31st, which is Wednesday night, and you can see all this at the same time, 10 o'clock, without the moon being full, which is nice. But for right now, we'll just come right back to the 28th, to now. And remember, this is because the moon is orbiting around the Earth, just as the Earth is orbiting around the sun, which means that at the same time of night, the moon's just kind of moved a little bit farther along in its track around the sun. Pretty cool. And so the snake, and I can turn the art on here for people who like the art. The snake curves its way up, Hydra curves its way up. And you can see there's a bunch of other not great constellations here, right? Like this right here is Sextant, which is why it says Alpha Sex. Here is Antlion. Is it Antlion? Is that Antlia? Is it Antlia? Antlia, not Antlion. That's a Half-Life thing. Antlia is the pump. This is the pump. Just a modern constellation. And a couple months back, we talked about modern constellations. You can go back and look up the modern constellations and hear about how constellations come and go, right? But mostly what I want to just show off is find Corvus. That's the real cool one to find in the spring. That's the thing I would like you to look at, right? And also look for Spica, right? Especially while we have the moon around here in the next couple of days. It should be pretty obvious because it's right near the moon, okay? And so that's really what I wanted to talk about. Are there anything else? Let's see if there's anything else in our sky map that might be of interest. Because whoops, I have the... It looks like we've talked about most everything here. Because we talked about Cetus, we talked about Andromeda a couple months ago. Arcturus and Bootes we talked about. There's some other stuff. This star Vindemiatrix, which is one of the other arms. If I turn off the sky map. Vindemiatrix... I think it means the solitary one. I want to just double check that it is in fact the solitary one. No, the grape harvestress. The grape harvestress. There's another one that means the solitary one. But if we look for Vindemiatrix, it should be... Is it this? Yeah, it's right there. It should be right. If you look Arcturus here, and the speed on to spike, and between the two, just above it is Vendemetrix, Epsilon Virginis. But what I really want to talk about is I want to talk about the Southern Hemisphere. Okay? And so to talk about the Southern Hemisphere, let's bop over to Space Engine. Oh, big. There we go. And so let's look at the Earth. So if I bop over to Space Engine and we go off into space a little bit, we can turn around. Ooh. There's the sun. Where's the Earth? Let's go to the Earth. I flew real far away from the Earth there. Shoop. Here's the Earth, round. And essentially, you can see here that I need to tilt it like this. Great. We can see that one side is, in darkness right now. India over here, right? There's the Middle East, Northern Africa, right? And so you can imagine if you're in Greece, ancient Greece right here, that these Northern Hemisphere stars are the stars you can see. But the Earth essentially blocks part of the stars that you can possibly see, right? All you can see from floating out here above ancient Greece, if we go a little closer, the horizon should come a little closer. All you can see are the stars that are above you because the Earth is essentially blocking a ton of them. And so all the stars that the ancient Greeks named, that the people in the Northern Hemisphere, so here's Orion, as we just showed it earlier, and there's Sirius, right? So if we curve over a little bit, we get more south, and we can actually see, let's see if we can find Corvus. There's Corvus right there. See, there's Corvus, right? Right here, all these constellations were named by the Greeks, and they are the constellations in the Northern Hemisphere. They're the constellations that the people in the Northern Hemisphere can see. But what about stars beyond the horizon? What if we just head south? So let's slow down our roll here. Let's float south. Notice as I go south, more and more stars are becoming visible above the horizon, right? In fact, these two bright blobbies are becoming visible. And the people who lived in the Southern Hemisphere, Aboriginal Australians, the people, early people who lived in the southern, people in sub-Saharan Africa, people in early settlers of South America. They saw these objects, but it wasn't until the Western Dutch astronomer or Dutch sailors went sailing down around the Cape of Good Hope and down around the south across the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans that they started looking at these constellations and writing them down and bringing them back to the West. And so when we look at the Southern Hemisphere constellations, we actually should recognize that they have been named generally by sailors and other astronomers who looked at their sky maps and made shapes out of them. But they are, so they're more modern than the ancient Greek constellations that we see. And they don't have as many great stories. And to be honest, they're not that great of constellations comparatively. But that's just because we're going from the Greek version. The ancient, Aboriginal peoples who looked at these had different names for them, and those names are just as valid, and they're just different stories and things. But generally, what I'll be showing you tonight comes from sailors in the 1500s, 1600s who were first getting this information back as they were going these long sailing journeys, because they had to look at the stars just as important, right? But remember, a lot of these stars for people in the South Pacific were super well known, especially because they were what guided them in their travels across the South Pacific to different islands, right? So Polynesian wayfinders were very familiar with these stars and constellations, and they were very important to them. And so when we think about them, it's when I make a judgment call about the constellations in the Southern Hemisphere, I'm mostly making a judgment call about the boring sailor names for them from the West. They're awesome stars, and I want to show some of them. And they have also some cool things like these two blobbies here, which I'll talk about as well. But you can see that essentially what happens is, as you get to the Southern Hemisphere down here, you now have new stars that are blocked that you can't see, whereas you can see new things down here, okay? So let's go back to, let's see, can I see? Yeah, there's the, this is where I started, but this right here, the South Pole, the South Celestial Pole is right down here. All of the Earth as it rotates, the South Pole of the Earth, which you can see down over here, points just over in this direction right here. And I'll tell you exactly how I know that. But let's bounce back over to here. And let's change our location let's change it to, I don't know, let's change it to someplace in Argentina, huh? How about this? Allen, Argentina, Bahia Blanca. Actually, you know what? I'm going to change it to someplace in Chile, someplace that I've been. Let's go to La Serena. La Serena, Coquimbo, Santiago. Am I not? Is it farther north? La Serena. I've been to La Serena. Here we are in La Serena. We're in the Southern Hemisphere. And so let's look at what we can see. Well, a lot of stars. That's great. Hey, look! I know this. It's the moon. All right. If we see the moon, then we can probably tell you what this blue star is right above it. That must be, say it with me, Spica, right? And then this must be, because I can kind of see right here, this must be Arcturus. Arcturus being on a Spica. That must mean that over here is where we could potentially see the Big Dipper, but I don't see it right now, which is interesting. But I can see the moon right now. Let's see what else we can see. Can we see anything else of familiarity? Oh man, there's some bright stuff over here that I do not recognize. I mean, I do, but for right now. Over in the north, looks a little hard to see. Let's go back. I think we're at currently 2 in the morning. Let's go back in time a little bit. Let's go back to like 9, 8. There we go. Okay, so this is the same time. Actually, let's go to the same time we just were. I don't know why the time went by so fast. It's 10 o'clock. Here's the moon. There's Spica again. All right. Good. Can we see the Big Dipper? I can't really see the Big Dipper right now, huh? But I do see over here. Can you see this? What's this? That's Orion, right? Isn't that interesting? Do you see something weird about Orion? Orion is upside down, right? Head's down here, shoulders, belt, sword. Orion is upside down. In fact, here's something else weird. The moon is upside down compared to what we see in the Northern Hemisphere. And if you've not seen the moon and seen what shape it is and which one, then you've not been watching any of my videos. We did a whole video on the moon. The moon should be in a different direction. It's askew. And the reason why that is because we're on a different part of the Earth entirely. Okay? So if I had the Earth here, and we're in the Northern Hemisphere, and then we're in the Southern Hemisphere, our feet are not pointing in the same way. You know, if you took someone at the North Pole and someone at the South Pole and you brought them right next to each other, they'd be upside down from each other. They'd be looking at the same thing in space, but our feet would be pointing in the opposite direction. And so because the Earth is round, our feet point in opposite directions. This is one of the reasons why it's pretty ridiculous why people are like, you know, the Earth is flat, because this is like a pretty great proof, because of the fact that things are upside down in the Southern Hemisphere. Unless you lived in a way where you'd that'd be really complicated. I don't want to get into Earth round stuff, but this is essentially a pretty easy thing to see, and I've seen it myself. In fact, for a while, the Apple Watch was not displaying the moon upside down as it should have been, but then that was corrected. And now if you go to the Southern Hemisphere, the moon, when it's like you have a little moon icon on your watch, it'll be the right way for based on the Southern Hemisphere, which is very nice of them. But the constellations that you see in the Northern Hemisphere are also upside down, right? Pretty interesting. You can see Sirius up here, pretty important. But now let's see what else we can see. Well, we can see the Milky Way stretching across the sky. It's kind of faint, but you can see it stretching across the sky here. Okay? And Sirius, there's another really bright star right here, and there's another set of bright stars over here, and another really bright star. In fact, these are the 3 brightest stars that you can see from the Earth. This star, and this star right there. Those are the 3 brightest stars from the Earth, all in one spot right now. Pretty cool. Can't see that. You can only see the brightest star from the Northern Hemisphere. Maybe every once in a while you can see this star if you're at a really low altitude, or latitude. Like if you live in southern Texas or something in America or Mexico, you can probably see these stars. But for where I live, which is, fairly low in latitude in America, I can't see this star. This star here is called Canopus. I can click on it, Canopus. It's Alpha Carina. We'll talk about that in a second. And this star here is called Alpha Centauri. It's a very important star, or Rigel Centaurus. Very important star because it's one of the closest stars to the Earth. Pretty neat. You can see that here when we show distance, it's 4 light years away. 4 light years away compared to Canopus here, which is 309 light years away. Or Sirius here, which is like what, it's 8 light years away? The other thing that we can see along the Milky Way is this right here. Can you see this right here? Now, if you live in Australia, you might be very familiar with this because it's on your flag. But can anybody identify this? There's not a lot of people chatting with me today. But if you're at home, you can say it out loud, because this is like one of the things that most people know in the Southern Hemisphere. It's on many flags. It's the stars are really important. It is in fact the Southern Cross. Do not think it's the false cross. Here's the false cross here. This is not the Southern Cross. This is the Southern Cross right here. And you can see this because of this star here, which is called what? It's got another name for it. Mosaic, is that the name for that star? I can't remember the name for the Southern Cross star. I want to just like make sure 100%. Gosh, why would that? I've accidentally started using the Bing search engine, which is not what I want. Southern Cross. Yeah. G-name. Yeah, must not be. Interesting. But that's the Southern Cross right here. And it's important because it actually points, these two stars point towards the southern celestial pole. Let's bring up our sky map. And I have specifically brought up a South Pole sky map for you all. Ba-dunk. Here's the Southern Hemisphere sky map. And we can see that the Southern Hemisphere, the Southern Cross is right here. I bet I can zoom in, make life a little bit easier for us all. So here is the Southern Cross right here. And you can see that these stars that are right here, the tall parts of the cross, point towards what says there's like a no stars here and a little thing that says SCP. The Sane Clown Posse. I'm very happy with that. That's very dumb. This is the South Celestial Pole. It's the place where the South Pole points to in the sky. So if we were in the South Pole and we look straight up, that would be right above us. But there's no star there. Not like Polaris in the Northern Hemisphere. There's no star that points to the Southern Hemisphere. So to find it, you're going to have to look for the Southern Cross and kind of hope that you can kind of figure out how far away based on our knowledge of the distance between these two stars, right? So if I do this, sky map off, we can look back towards this, and I can make time go on. So let's go make time go on faster, all right? So watch, look at how there's no star in there, right? We're gonna just make the day go all the way by. In fact, let's turn the atmosphere off. Hold your breath. No star there, right? Sorry, everybody. This is now 20. Let's put the atmosphere back on. There's no star there, so you have to kind of use this to kind of guide which way is south, right? So that's the cool thing about the Southern Celestial Pole and the Southern Cross, right? If I turn on my art here, you can see the Southern Cross here. And remember, watch out for the false cross. It is not, in fact, it is part of this horrifying constellation here, which is the ship. This is Alpha Centaurus. Alpha Centaurus is in the Centaur constellation, which is actually a constellation that's pretty good. I'm going to actually turn on H.A. Ray's stuff again because I like it a lot better than this. But if I turn on the lines here, you can see that it is a centaur. Front legs, back legs, the body of the horse, the body, the hands are up here, right? Pretty cool. And then this, which is the ship. So the ancient sailors, they saw essentially a bunch of constellations that they were like, a bunch of stars, they were like, well, these are the bright ones. They're all part of a ship. Now, it's a janky ship. It's a real janky ship. This is the sail of the ship, and this is, I think, the poop deck, right? And like, yeah, this is Puppis, poop deck. Like, this is maybe another, oh, gosh, it's really not a great constellation. The sail, this is the front of the ship. And like, this is Canopus, the brightest star in the ship, or Alpha Carinus, which is the hull of the ship. It is really not a great constellation for like a thing that actually looks like it. Like if I turn off the stars, you're like, I don't know which ones it is. If I turn it back on, you're like, oh, I guess that's it, right? It intersects with this other constellation right here. Not my favorite. Again, there are better. The other thing I want to show off right over in this part of the sky is that the Milky Way is through it here, right? So it's pretty easy to find because the Milky Way goes through it. And if you're in a dark spot in the Southern Hemisphere, you definitely should check all this stuff out, okay? And Sirius is right here, right? So if you know how to find Sirius, because you've been, you've followed the 3 stars of Orion's belt to Sirius, and Sirius is the brightest star in the sky, you can continue along that way to go and essentially find where the Southern Cross is, and then also between now and then, you also see Canopus. But remember, beware the false cross. There's also another false cross that's over here that's like a diamond cross, but it's not that bright. It's not as bright as this other false cross. So those are some of the, constellations of the Southern Hemisphere. But you can see there's other weird ones here, right? Like down here. Like if I click on this is Alpha Reticulum. What is Reticulum? Like, oh gosh. Reticulum. What's Reticulum? I gotta double check this. Reticulum. It is a small net or reticle. Whoops. Wrong thing. So that is the small net. A lot of these constellations were made by Western astronomers who saw the first star maps from the stellars and were like, well, what can we do? And so they just gave them this looks like the walkie-talkie. Cha. I don't even know what Cha is. Let's see which constellation. Where's my list of something called IAU designated constellation? Ah, yes. The Chameleon. Ah, the Chameleon. This is the Chameleon. It looks like a chameleon, right? Does not. And this right here, Musca, the fly. There's a fly right there. This is a triangulum. This is the triangulum Australian, the Southern Triangle. Because it looks like a triangle. Oh no. I have bad internet right now. I shouldn't. It should be good. Oh no, we're good. We're good. All right. Whoa. So there's some not great constellations. You have the river Eridanus down here, which is just a bunch of stars that they've said is a river. Astronomers end up knowing a lot of these things because we know of stars and objects inside of them, galaxies and stuff inside of them. So we go, what's, so if there's something in this, it'd be like Alpha, like something Triangulum Australia, right? Lupus, the wolf, right? Or Musca, these kind of classic names for, constellations and stuff. I think we're back. Are we back at maintaining? My stream status is currently poor, but it looks fine. Looks like we're doing all right for ourselves. But I want to highlight some other stuff. So let's turn the art off, or the constellation lines off here. I want to highlight some other stuff that you can see in the Southern Hemisphere. That's pretty nice. First off, and it's not super easy to see here because they don't have the Milky Way on very nice, but right below this is a spot of the Milky Way called the coal sack, which is a dark patch of dust in the Milky Way. And it's notable. Let's actually bring up a picture of the Milky Way so you can really see the coal sack here. Are you ready? Let's turn the internet on. Whoops. Internet. Boom. If I do this, and this, here's our picture, and I can make it bigger so we can really see it. You can see, so I'll drag myself again. You can see, Kevin Pointer, the Southern Cross here, right? Alpha Crux is here. And you can also see Alphas and Beta Centauri. And so right below the Southern Cross and to the left is the coal sack. And it's important because it is the head of an aboriginal constellation that isn't really a constellation, an aboriginal sky art that's actually the emu. Okay, and it's one of the only things that we know of from an ancient culture that's a negative space forming the basis for a shape in the sky. So in a dark spot, they would see this as the body and neck of this emu, and there's the head of the emu, right? So that the eye and the neck, or eye and the beak, and the neck comes this way, and the body of the emu is this way. Isn't that cool? You can see that, and this was an important thing for Aboriginal Australians. This flightless bird that they patterned based on dust lanes. What you're seeing here is the Milky Way, and these are just dust lanes. It's not an absence of stars, it's just there's a lot of dust in the Milky Way, and that dust ends up blocking a lot of the light from the other stars that you would see out, and that is forming the shape of the emu. Pretty cool. The coal sack. And again, to find it, if we turn back our internet off here, to find it, we're going to look just below this. You got to be in a very dark sky in the Southern Hemisphere to see this. So maybe if you live in the Northern Hemisphere, this is something you just bring up later or jot down as like, I think I'd like to see. It's funny. I have my little preview here going, and it's really funny to see me dragging my stupid little body around and floating around. Like, it's a really weird way of pointing. I should probably not do that and just bring up, like, I think I have like a pointer somewhere, but for right now, it's nice to be able to point at other stuff. But this is the coal sack. The other thing I want to show is down here, if we look at these objects, we can actually go, let's see if I can find it. It's going to be really tough to find, but yeah, it's right here. So if we look at the cross and we look at Alpha Beta Centauri, there's another star above it. This here is Epsilon Centauri. And you can drag your way straight up through there to this right here, which is actually one star out of a gajillion stars inside of this object right here, which is known as Omega Centauri. Omega Centauri, right? It looks like just one star, but it's actually a globular cluster. Let me bring up what Omega Centauri actually looks like. Are you ready? This is actually Omega Centauri. This is a globular cluster. Globular clusters have like 100,000 stars. They're all in a big assembly of stars, like a giant ball of stars. They're all about the same age. They're all about made of the same kind of stuff, like, star stuff, but the similar ratios of stuff in there. And they're all held together by gravity pretty strongly. And they're some of the oldest objects in our whole galaxy are these, objects like this. Let's look at Omega Cen in Space Engine, huh? Why don't we do that? It's a fun thing. So if I come back, I think if I do F2, we go into Space Engine, we search for Omega Cen. Maybe Omega Cen's not there. It's got another name, doesn't it? NGC 5139. And so again, we've looked for the Southern Cross here, directly above it. We've centered it. And now let's zoom in. There it is. And you can actually see this with your naked eye. It's hard and faint, hard to see, pretty faint, but it's pretty bright. Let's go there. Let's float there. Are you ready for this? Takes a while. We got to really travel across the galaxy. Notice we're leaving essentially the galaxy to get there. From Omega Cen, we'll be able to turn back and look at the galaxy because globular clusters are kind of orbiting around the edges of the galaxy. They were formed probably early on when the galaxy was forming from giant clouds of stars or of gas that became big clouds, right? So if we zoom in, fly into it, you can see that it's got tons and tons and tons of stars, right? 100,000 stars. So looking around, this is what it would look like on the inside of a globular cluster. And you can see that we're over near one of the edges of the Milky Way, right? If we zoom out, fly out of it, look at where it is compared with the Milky Way, right? It's outside. Big old blob of stars like this, right? And it's something you can see with your naked eye, something outside of our galaxy. One of my favorite things to do is to do this, is to go, are you ready? It's to fly backwards through. Here, let's try that again. I really like this. It's to fly backwards through a globular cluster. I think it's really pretty. All these stars are pretty old. You're not going to find a lot of blue, hot, young stars. These are mostly older, middle-aged to older stars in their life cycle. If there's life on any of them, it's life that, lived, like its heyday may have been a long time ago. We can just click on one of these like this right here. Center it. I've just centered the whole thing, haven't I? Let's go there. Let's go to this one star I've just picked out of random. Whoa, really bright. Let's look at its properties. Does it have planets? Have they predicted planets? They have not. They've made... Oh, they have. This is a Taurid super Jupiter. Taurid arid Terra. What about this? Hot arid Subterra. Let's look at the Taurid arid Terra. Here's the planet that it's predicted. And imagine living as this is your night sky, right? This is what you'd see at night. So many bright stars, an incredibly old star giving off a ton of gas into space, belching into space, and then the Milky Way stretching out above you, right? A bunch of little moons. This is one of the moons of it. Pretty cool, right? I think it's pretty cool to imagine living in this. Yes, Kevin, really neat. For those of you watching online after the fact, I did not just talk to myself. One of the viewers is named Kevin as well. Welcome. And you can see it from the Earth. In fact, let's go back to the Earth. The Earth right now distance is 5 kiloparsecs away. So we fly all the way in towards the Earth. Back into the plane of the Milky Way. We talked about the Milky Way last month. And all the way back to our dorky little planet. Hello. If we turn back around, you can see exactly where we were, where I find the Southern Cross right here, Alpha and Beta Centauri. I look directly up, and we were just looking back, right up, page up here, right up here, I think it is. Oh, it's right there. Isn't that it? Maybe that's something else. Yeah, anyway. The other thing is Alpha Centauri right here. We can go to Alpha Centauri. It's only 1.34 parsecs, which is, 4 light years away. So let's go there, huh? Be a lot quicker. Especially if I press G twice and it goes there really fast. Foop. Notice the stars didn't change a huge amount. So here's Alpha and Beta Centauri. Or Alpha and Proxima Centauri, excuse me. Alpha Centauri A and B. Maybe I'm wrong. These two stars. And if we turn around, you can see that most of the stars haven't changed positions very much. I think if we look, we can probably find some things we know of pretty well. So let's see if we can find. There we go. So there's the V of Taurus the Bull, but Aldebaran has been changed a little bit. And look, it's Orion. Right? We have Sirius a little bit off from where it should be. Sirius should be down below. But you can see essentially Orion here, the belt, the sword. We haven't moved that much in our galaxy. We're pretty far away. This is farther than humans could travel. But, Sirius has moved quite a bit. But otherwise, can we look for the sun? Let's see what the sun looks like. There's the sun. That's the sun. Imagine what constellation would be, if you lived over on a planet here. So if I click on Alpha Centauri, B or whatever, and I click on, let's see if they've simulated some planets here. Alpha Centauri, are there planets? Did they simulate any planets? Solar System browser? Oh, it looks like they haven't. Huh. Where's Proxima Centauri? Let's go out of the browser. This is the closest star. Right now it's kind of faint because Space Engine has a little bit of trouble. If I go and I look at its solar system chart, we can do Proxima Centauri B. So let's go and land on this planet, which is perfectly blue because, again, Space Engine has a little bit of trouble when it's loading a bunch of stuff in. And from Proxima Centauri B, we can see exactly what they were showing you. Orion, a little bit wonky, but still pretty noticeable as Orion. Sirius is moved. Aldebaran should be over here from the Earth, but you still see the V of Taurus. You still see the Pleiades, which is pretty cool. And if we find the sun, which is what? This right here? Is this the sun? Yep. There's the sun. Right there. And if we zoom in, if we center that, and we just zoom in, you can see it's really, really, really tough for us to actually make out any planets. Really tough. But right now, you can take a picture of the sun and also just this random galaxy that's been generated at the same time. Pretty cool. Pretty dang cool. Let's reset our zoom here. So let's go there. Oh, I went to a galaxy. That's wrong. Well, all right, we went to a distant galaxy. Sorry about that, everybody. Here's the Earth again. This one's actually loaded because it loaded first. One of the last things I want to talk about in the Southern Hemisphere are these two objects, here and here, right? So what's this right here? This is Canopus. We were just talking about Canopus. Canopus, remember, we've got Sirius, Canopus, and then Alpha Centauri. So the three brightest stars are, oh, my watch is telling me to stand. But if we look to the left of Canopus right here, you see this blobby and this blobby. And what you're seeing here are we call the large and the small Magellanic Clouds. And they're two nearby galaxies. They're dwarf galaxies, which means that they're not as big as the Milky Way, and in fact, they're pretty irregularly shaped here. But what you're seeing here is millions to maybe a billion stars and some gas and dust. That's the large one, and there's the small Magellanic Cloud. And we think that these clouds are early galaxies that formed alongside the Milky Way and maybe have gone around the Milky Way as they've spiraled around. As the Milky Way has formed, these galaxies formed alongside of it, and there are these streams of stars that are probably pulled off of the Milky Way or off of the Magellanic Cloud as it whipped around our galaxy. But you can see them from the Southern Hemisphere. The first time I saw them, I was in Chile. It was, over a decade ago, probably 2010. And I was like a third-year graduate student. So it must have been maybe 2009, huh? Woof. I was early in my graduate school career, and I was given a chance. It was 2009. I was given a chance to go down to Chile, La Serena, where we've been looking when we've been using Stellarium, and then up to a telescope there. And I was really kind of bummed because I was hoping on my first trip to be able to see these, but the moon was full. And when the moon's full, it's really hard to see a lot of bright objects. But we were using an infrared telescope, and then on the first, second night of observing, there was a bang on the door, and it was an astronomer who actually is here at the university with me, and he came up and he said, "Hey, I heard you complaining at dinner, and I wanted to let you know the moon doesn't rise for 15 minutes. So you have 15 minutes to let your eyes adjust. But there's the large Magellanic Cloud. There's the small Magellanic Cloud. There's the Coalsack. Happy birthday." It was my birthday also at the same time. It was a really wonderful trip, and I got to see these. And if you have not seen them, you should go down and see them. They're fuzzier. They're not nearly this bright. You can imagine they more look like this, right? So kind of a fuzzy blob that you're like, I think I see what that is. But with the magic of my software, I can really crank it up and show you. And we could actually do something even better. We can show you what it looks like with a telescope. Although it does look quite a bit like, so I can show you what the large Magellanic Cloud looks like here. Are you ready for large Magellanic Cloud? This is an actual photograph of large Magellanic Cloud right here. Boop. If I close this. Shrink these down a little bit. You can see it when I do the internet on one of my OBS sources or scenes. It's different than the others, but like you can see, these red spots are spots of, dust and older stars. The blue areas are large, brighter stars. You can see this is what's called an irregular galaxy. So it doesn't have like a big spiral structure. It's not a big blob like an elliptical galaxy. It's kind of a, all over the place galaxy. If I turn this back off, actually, if we go here, you can see a photograph here. This is some telescopes looking out at the large and the small Magellanic Clouds in Chile. Pretty cool. And so essentially, if we come back to here. Whoa, I think I turned off the stars. The Southern Hemisphere is filled with a bunch of stars that are not in the greatest named constellations to the west. It's a bummer. But there are some really great things to look out for, like the Southern Cross, Alpha and Beta Centauri. Or is this Beta Centauri? Yeah, Alpha and Beta Centauri. Things like Canopus, the False Cross, and other constellations which are upside down. Okay? So I want to finish there. If there's any questions, I'd love to see if there's any questions. You can ask me those questions. It'd be really nice. But otherwise, this was really fun. Next month, we'll probably talk about some more spring constellations. And I wonder if there's anything else. You should make a comment. You can, click to subscribe click to like. It helps, I guess. I don't really pay attention to that very much, which is probably bad if I want to be a real popular YouTube creator. But mostly I just want to make these for anybody who's watching, and it's nice in the future to pass these along to people. I got a root canal last month, and I was able to, one of my endodontists was talking about how her daughter was like really, really into astronomy. And I was like, oh, well, if you want to do some stargazing, here's a great guy. And it'd be nice to just have all these, but like it does help that you view, and it does help that you click like and make comments and stuff. And I really appreciate that. I read the comments and I really enjoy the comments, even the ones that are just referencing a video I made over a decade ago, because you're all really polite. I don't have a lot of jerks. I'm at a really nice level of fame, which is none. And so when you're at a level of none fame, it means that any fame that you get or any comments you get feel really warm, and you don't just get a bunch of jerks, which is nice. Avery. Oh, it's nice that you could watch these, Avery. I'm glad that you could. I hope, Avery, that you do get a chance to go outside, because it's one really wonderful thing about Tucson right now is that it's been really clear, and like when it's not windy, there's some great stuff. I showed a lot of Southern Hemisphere things, but you can go back through some other last months. And really, the main thing is go to skymaps.com, download your sky maps. I should also showcase, by the way, if you go between the Northern and Southern Hemisphere sky maps, if I zoom back out here, and I'm going to go back and forth. There. You can see how this line, the ecliptic, is now up here, right? So the constellations that are along the ecliptic, Virgo, Leo, Cancer, Gemini, your astrological constellations, they are now down here. And the Northern Hemisphere, they stretch across the sky, but they're all way up here in the Southern Hemisphere sky, right? Because you're seeing more things. So think about it as you're seeing other stuff, which is pretty cool. Oh, gosh, Tyler, nice watching. Thank you for watching as well. I really hope you see some of this. There's some fun stuff. But otherwise, this was fun, and I will. I'll see you all next month, and have a really great time. Go out and look at some stars. My request for you this time is here. If we finish up back up in Tucson, I go to Tucson, and we go to night. My challenge for you tonight is to go out, find the Big Dipper, go out at 10. Find the Big Dipper. So we're at 10 o'clock at night. We're all outside. Find the Big Dipper in the north. Arc to Arcturus here. Arc over to the star Arcturus. See if you can see the ice cream cone. Remember, the cone is pointing towards the moon now. And speed on to Spica. That's what I want you to do for this one. Okay? Anyway, bye, everybody. You're all wonderful. You're all friends. Have a nice month. Good night. Now I do that part where I sit here and wait until I'm actually done over here. Before I can actually click end stream so that I don't cut myself off. And if someone sees this, then they're just seeing me ramble. It happens every month. I don't know exactly how YouTube does this. I'm going to have to just double check and make sure that it's. Now I do that part. Oh, yep. All right, this is actually it. Okay, bye.